This is my conversation with Chris Sugai, the General Manager of Gates Corporation's Mobility Unit. Chris is a serial entrepreneur with 40 years of business building experience, best known in cycling as the founder of Niner Bikes, where he championed 29-inch wheels when they represented less than 1% of the market. Now at Gates, a 115-year-old, $3.5 billion company, Chris is leading an effort to replace chains with belt drives across bicycles, motorcycles, and other mobility products. We discuss the parallels between the resistance he faced with Niner and current belt drive adoption challenges, the critical role of OEM partnerships, and what it's like transitioning from entrepreneur to employee after decades of running his own companies. Chris shares candid insights about selling Niner, the capital challenges of rapid growth, and how Gates' resources are enabling him to push forward an entirely new technology in cycling. This is a Business of Cycling podcast. So Chris Sugai, thank you so much for taking the time. I know we had to go through some hoops. I know you guys have, being a publicly traded company, Gates is a large company. You know, on your the tubing and the rubber business is huge. Part of your business obviously is in cycling, but that's a very small part of it. So appreciate your team being patient with me and working through everything to get you here. So I'm excited to hear about it. Where does this podcast find you today?
I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, wow. Very cool. And beautiful place. Would you say that Colorado is kind of the center of cycling in America?
If you're a mountain biker or a cyclist, road cyclist, gravel cyclist, I think everybody has a bucket list trail somewhere in Colorado
Okay.
that they want to ride. So I've been, fortunate being here to have ridden a few of them, and the legend is true. So yeah, if you can get yourself out here, it is a cyclist playground.
So I work with a brand that does mountain bikes. And, we get out here in Italy, in northern Italy, and we get to ride a bit. I know that the trails are much more restrictive in terms of, who and where you can mountain bike. I know it's much tougher in the US, which I was kind of surprised to hear. Hopefully that's something they can, change in the future, but they see them more as like motor vehicles. And so it's very, very, very tough to get those out.
Yeah, trail conflict here is, one of those things that regulation is still working on. People for Bikes, which is also located here in Boulder, Colorado, is a big advocate for riders in the United States and working on building legislation so that there's clear guidelines of where you can and cannot e-bike and also mountain bike and hikers using similar trails, avoiding those conflicts or trying to reach some kind of consensus for that. So, but there are a lot of places to ride, there when you especially when you talk about Colorado, because there are so many mining trails and other areas that are legal for other vehicles to ride on, that e-bikes can go on those things fairly well, mountain bike e-bikes and gravel e-bikes and so forth.
Sure. You just got to pick your spots.
Yeah, but we don't have the free for all that some other countries enjoy.
Probably. Yeah. So, to start out, maybe you want to just tell us a little bit about where you're from, your background, your where you studied, where you kind of started out.
Well, okay, if you want to go far back, I was born and raised in Simi Valley, California, which is a small suburb outside of Los Angeles. And I started riding bikes when I was, 6 years old. My father was a big enduro motorcycle rider. So, as soon as I learned how to ride a bike, there was a motorcycle in the garage, and I started trail riding at a very young age. Graduated into, started racing BMX when I was in my teens, and then fell into mountain biking when I entered into college, and never stopped, and developed some deep friendships through the mountain bike community. So I've always had a passion for cycling and also business. I think I was kind of an unusual kid that, I started reading business books when I was in my teens and subscribed to, Forbes magazine, I think when I was 19 years old. But so yeah, that's my sort of early beginnings and some of the things I've been passionate about.
Where did you like your formative, or your what sort of like schooling did you do your early years at work? Like, where did you start working?
Let's see, well, I worked for my father for a period of time when I was 14, and through through 16, and then I got a job, a real job. My first real job with a paycheck was at McDonald's.
Okay.
And then I started my first business when I was 19. When I was in college, I was studying economics, and and well, I started when I was 19. I grew that. I had that business for over 25 years. It's
What
actually
kind of
still
business?
window tinting. So I was really into cars when I was younger,
Yeah.
and sort of fell into it. It's a longer story, backstory on that one, but was able to grow the company called Solar Art, and was able to grow that to the largest in Los Angeles and about the fifth largest in the United States. And I did that for 25 years.
That was your business.
And yes, yeah, I started that as a small business, and I had managers running the company at some point in time, and I read a book, a passage in a book. I think it's Seven Habits of Highly Successful People. Stephen Covey. Do something you love, never work a day in your life, and that saying stuck with me for a long time. And so I told my wife, I'm going to try to start another business. And this was just going to be a hobby business on the side of the three things, you don't have to pay me to do on a Saturday, which is, watch Formula One, play poker, or mountain bike. And so I spent a year poking around in those three industries, and I was riding mountain bikes, every week, and 29-inch mountain bikes. This is in 2004. Started to emerge onto the scene. They actually started in 1999 with Wes Willits, and I picked one up and started riding it. And if anybody that rides, if you ride with a group of friends, you kind of know there's a pecking order when you're going up the hill, who gets there on the first, and then there's a pecking order going down, and who's the first there. And I was never first in any of those categories, but I just enjoyed riding. But I found myself leaping ahead quite a few people climbing up the hill on a 29er, and then passing a bunch of people I normally never pass going downhill. So it kind of struck a light bulb of, this is something really interesting. And that's sort of how Niner Bikes got formed back in 2005. And
Right. You started Niner, and it sounds like you made a lot of your, we'll say, business education on the ground, in the field with this, the window tinting business you mentioned. And it sounds like, having it grow and having it be successful. Did you end up selling that business?
yes, for about 5 years, I ran the window tinting business and Niner Bikes concurrently
Okay.
for about 5 years. But then I reached a point where I realized that, Niner was going to be a successful business, and I decided to sell off the window tinting company. And the new owner has done a great job expanding that company. So.
So there's a point where you say, I would rather cash out rather than be a shareholder or a partner. That, like, what is the, because it sounds, you also you also had sold Niner as well, correct?
At a later stage, yeah,
Yeah. So,
I owned and ran Niner for 20 years
right.
after that. So, but yeah, it came a time. I'm one of those all-in type of people. If I
Right.
if I'm in something, I put all of my effort in, and I felt it was unfair to the people at Solar Art that I was really distracted with Niner
Sure.
and spending all my time working on that. So I didn't have the energy to run. And also, after 5 years, I just ran out of energy trying to run both companies. So.
Sure. And so you felt like it wasn't fair to yourself, it wasn't fair to the company. So you just say, look, I'm going to step away. And to be able to do that, we can find kind of an agreement. And I guess just personal curiosity, you didn't want to just sit there and collect dividends?
No, I mean, Solar Art was still what we would consider a small business, and it still required, my hands to keep the business, operating properly. It wasn't that type of situation where I could just sit back on
Step
a
away. Okay.
and money be rolling in. I was still hands-on in the business. So again, trying to have my hands on two different businesses, and especially with Niner growing so fast during that period of time, it just
You needed
consumed all
you
of my
needed that
time.
energy. Sure, I get it. And so you grew Niner. So it looks like you did 25 years window tinting, 20 years of Niner, 40 years of entrepreneurship, and then now you're an employee.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I'm an employee of Gates, and I actually quite enjoy it.
Why? Okay, so you go. Ab- uh, So this is something you saw, I presume you saw a project, there was a project here, a vision to build the bicycle business for Gates. Before we jump into that, do you want to tell all the uninitiated about Gates, just the quick and dirty overview?
Sure. Gates was, founded in 1911 in Denver, Colorado by Charles Gates. And, we are in a large industrial supplier to a number of industries. You can think of our business in two segments, hoses. So we call fluid power. So if you want to move any type of fluid, either within an engine or cooling for AI
Radiator,
chips,
radiators.
that's something that we do.
Yep.
We're a big part of. And then belts. So if you need to move energy from one point to another, a belt drive, we specialize in that field, and they're used in everything from vacuums, coffee makers, obviously, and the bicycle side where we work to replace a chain and use a belt. So those are the different industries that we play in, and we're traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And yeah, it's a great company to work for.
Big company.
It's a $3.5 billion company, I think. So in the cycling industry, we consider it a large company, I
I
think,
think
in that.
the largest, yeah, I think Pirelli's in there, you guys. And so the touch points are, it sounds like rubber.
Rubber and different polymers. So the
Polymers,
hoses and
yeah.
belts are made out of different compounds. Rubber being one of the larger ones.
Right, right. Okay. And so you've got your entrepreneurial experience. This opportunity comes up with Gates. So, and Gates being from Denver, it sounds like you knew Gates or you knew who Gates was.
Yes.
And so you saw this opportunity. I presume the opportunity is to help build the belt drive business in cycling.
Yeah, I kind of just worked out one of those things, a little bit of luck and a little bit of timing that that this opportunity came about to be the general manager for what we call internally the mobility unit. And so what our team is tasked is with, basically anything with two wheels. So when we look at, electric scooters and then motor scooters, electric motorcycles, and we call ICE motorcycles, and then anything on the bicycle side, we also work on the side by sides and then the ATV market. And then we also participate in the fitness market. So those are all the areas of influence, and our objective is to replace a chain in all of those vehicles with one of our belts.
That's the mandate. And and it sounds like the idea, the hypothesis that Gates has and that is seeing is that there's superiority in belt driven transmission, and you guys are working to provide that. I don't know what would you call it? Help mature this part of the market for mobility bit for the mobility business, as well as the growth, the general growth of the mobility business. Is that sort of the hypothesis that the ownership has, kind of laid out?
Yes, it's kind of interesting the parallels that I see around belt drive and 29-inch wheels. When I started riding a 29er, it was less than 1% market share. I mean, in my group of 35 riders, I was the only one on a 29er, and it stayed that way for a while. And and growing Niner at that time, and all the pushback we got from the industry of those wheels are too heavy, the bikes look weird, they can't corner as well as a regular bike, and they don't roll over, they don't perform well downhill. Just numerous objections, and 95% of all those objections came from people that have never experienced or ridden the product. And then coming here to Gates and helping drive mobility, I hear the same comments of, oh, it's a belt, it'll stretch, it doesn't last, it's weaker than a chain. How can this hold up under these type of conditions? And it's funny, it's the same thing, but once people try a belt drive, then their tune completely changes. They're like, oh, this is a simple device, it's super durable. I see the benefits. I don't have to clean my bike, my drivetrain after installing this. I actually get better pickup because there's no slack in the chain. The belt is solid. So there's numerous benefits that you see. Obviously, the whole system is lighter, but it's been the same uphill challenge of getting public opinion turned around. And I've now I've learned to be patient, that it just takes time with Niner. It took time, and then once you sort of build up this consensus of enough people riding and trying the product out, obviously 29ers now are the dominant wheel size within the industry, that I see the same future for belt drives.
And so you guys, from your position, it sounds like you guys are a designing and providing these solutions for the various types of mobility sectors, right? So you have certain sectors and you guys are adapting to provide these solutions. Is it sort of a kind of you're building on the fly, or like where are the products coming from? Is it something that you guys are developing, or is it something that you're working with product managers to develop? How does that exactly work?
Sure. I think the culture at Gates is about innovation. Our tagline is driven by possibilities. And, one thing I'm very proud of working at Gates is because they were formed in 1911. So they're, what's the math there? 115, year old company now. You don't, I mean, think about how many companies are still in business after 115 years. Like, it's a pretty short list of companies that survive that long. And you don't survive by making the same thing day in and day out. You survive, especially in the industry we're in, by innovating. And so we definitely have a culture of innovation. And so we are constantly experimenting and pushing the edges of the technologies and the areas we play in. So, I think we have a number of products, especially when you look at from the mobility standpoint, that we are, the innovators in, and that we lead in those areas. And we plan on, continuing to innovate going forward, and coming up with new products that cyclists and motorcyclists, want to see to help benefit their ride feel.
And that's also, I presume, working with drivetrain manufacturers, working with bicycle manufacturers, working with power sports manufacturers. Those are, I suppose, I guess you have product managers that you're meeting with, that are constantly out looking for where the innovation's happening. And also, so you have innovation and adoption, I presume, right?
Yeah, you can innovate by itself, but in a vacuum, that it only takes you so far. You have to have a team that's can engage with OEMs. So, on the motorcycle side, we are very good at partnering with, different large OEM brands, and helping, integrate our product into their product categories. And then on the bicycle side, we have a deep knowledge team that works with, frame manufacturers and then drivetrain OEMs to, put together a system that works for what the brand is looking to bring to their customer base.
And so those types of activities, I think, they're very, very heavily integrated with the OEMs. You guys are an ingredient brand at the end of the day.
Yes.
And so being an ingredient brand, a huge, huge part of your work is spending time with the OEMs. That's where the work is done.
Yes, at the end of the day, that's where the nitty-gritty comes in, and working in tandem with the product managers and their engineering team to make sure that the parameters are set up correctly for a belt drive. It's one of the challenges with a belt drive. It's the same challenge I faced with Niner bikes. When we were developing Niner and we were trying to expand, and one of the big things that held us back were the fork manufacturers were very resistant to changing, to adopting the 29-inch wheel. And, they basically refused our requests to develop a 29er fork back in the day, and was quite a challenge. And so with the 29er bike, you need to change not only the wheels, you need to change the fork, you need a new frame. So it's a big ask for someone to go into that, and you need other partners to play along in order for the whole package to work. And we're sort of seeing the same thing evolving right now with belt drive, in that, the bicycle manufacturers have to what we call split the frame. There has to be a split somewhere in what we call the seat stay, so that the belt can slip through. So that's a challenge for the frame manufacturers to adopt simple technology. And then at the same time, they have to adopt, instead of using a derailleur, they have to use some type of internal shifting system,
Yeah.
either it be a gearbox at the where the cranks are, or using a hub shifter at the rear of the bike. So, and there's only and just like 29ers back in the day, there's just a limited number of players offering those alternative shifting devices. So, those are some of the areas where we're seeing some where I see in the future that will open up over time, just because I think belt drives are getting more popular in the cycling world. And on the motorcycle and the scooter side, it's a little bit easier adoption because, they already have a clutch and so forth, and there's already a single drive. It's just a matter of adoption.
And probably the upside in the cycling is bigger too because of the little bit less maturity in that side of things, possibly.
I think the cycling industry, just as a culture, is more open to change. I think the motorcycle and scooter markets are very cost-driven industries, so they're a little slower to change to technologies until it's really proven that it's a benefit.
I've seen you guys are really active on the trade show scene, with a big, lot of presence, a lot of visibility. What, other than the trade shows and working with manufacturers on the product development, what are some of the challenges of getting in front of the customer? Because it doesn't sound like that's something that is a huge, it's not easy, obviously, as an ingredient brand. How do you guys see, marketing to the final customer? Is that something that maybe isn't quite a super high priority right now, which, could very well be?
Yeah, when you're working with a product that is unfamiliar to the public and they don't quite understand, or they don't even know what they don't know about the benefits of it is always a tension of push and pull between, pushing OEMs to adopt the technology and then having riders discover it when they ride their product, or trying to educate the general public on the idea and then pulling manufacturers to change their products because there's demand, they're creating the demand. So yeah, it's a delicate balance, and one I think every company struggles with.
Yeah, especially in ingredient brands. But what it sounds like is you guys are very focused on the innovation side of things. And when you're focused on the innovation side of things, it sort of dictates which partners are going to be good partners for you.
Yes, I found that, you end up finding people that brands that are open, that are more forward looking and are open to trying new things, are the ones that you hitch your wagon to, and you enjoy the success together.
Yeah, and then from a marketing standpoint, you're sort of, as an ingredient brand, you're sort of not putting yourself in their hands, but you can trust them to give you the visibility, kind of win with them, win with that winner in that way, rather than than
Right.
going.
Definitely a, co-partnership with those companies that are adopting our technology and going forward with it. Yeah.
Sure. And so basically you had this 40-year of innovation or of entrepreneurship, probably putting fires out every single day, insane, probably an insane ride. And now you're in where you're driving a this division and this business. What are the big differences from going from, building your own business and having to do payroll to, running this division? What are some of the things that have struck you the most?
I enjoy the level of cooperation within the company and not having to put out every fire by yourself. You've got a team to work with, and you've got external resources to help you with complicated matters.
Definitely.
It really helps. And there's just so many situations I could rattle off where it's been invaluable being able to keep our team focused on what we're trying to do, and then having Greater Gates jump in and their teams being able to solve other problems that would consume our team if we had to, rally those type of resources. So that's been really an interesting eye-opener experience because I've always just been, self-employed person,
Right.
but often having teams, but teams that are much smaller in scale than what we have here at Gates. We have 15,000 employees here, so.
Sure, but I mean, I suppose you probably had an adjustment period where you kind of wanted to do everything by yourself, coming from an entrepreneurial background where you kind of had to adjust, I presume.
To a certain degree, Niner was purchased by United Wheels in 2018, and I would work for that company for a while as an employee. So I
Okay.
got a lot of that out of me during that period of time, and so that was a good experience because that was really the first time, well, other than when I worked at McDonald's, where I was getting a paycheck from somebody, and I had to take orders. Well, I had to take direction. It was a great experience. I learned a lot, and it helped me adapt to Gates, I think. So,
Sure. And so leaving, I guess, going back to, you mentioned that the initial business that you had run, that you had started, you felt like you wanted to focus your attention on Niner because that was sort of taking all of your energy. Tell us more about the exit from Niner. Like what was your sort of rationale there?
the company had gotten itself really over leveraged. So we had to we were growing at double digits every single year, which consumes a lot of
Cash.
capital
Yep,
to grow it.
cash. You got to put money in.
Yep. And, I had strained my own internal resources and had to take capital from banks
Your
and
money.
out.
You didn't, yeah, you were putting all your money in the business.
So it got to a point where the risk got too large
Yeah,
and we
no, I
got
get it.
over. And so yeah, we were sort of forced into a sale, but it did work out well with United Wheels taking over the company, and Niner Bikes is still alive and well. And so, at the end of the day, I enjoyed that journey. It was something I'll never forget and never regret doing. So
It's not easy. I mean, I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, Cervelo, I've talked with Gerard from, you have 20% growth, but then you have to buy product to do another 20% growth. And that's like all of your profit goes right back into the business.
yeah, no, I remember one of my mentors said, hey Chris, growing a company growing at double digits is just as dangerous as a company that's shrinking by double digits. So yeah, he was right.
It's a capital game, especially with, the production or the manufacturing being outsourced to the Far East. So yeah, so tell us. It sounds like the Gates. I mean, I have a friend who's works with your team, and I can, just speaking with him, it sounds like you guys are really moving forward. The train is kind of moving. Seems really positive. The adoption that's happening. So what are kind of your ambitions, or what's your vision for the next few years with Gates?
We want to continue to expand in the areas that we play in. There's a lot of room for us to grab market share in those areas, and obviously we're always going to keep our eye for new areas that we can grow in, and we want to bring meaningful innovations to riders and making their sport or whatever they do more enjoyable. And yeah, and I just feel over time we'll continue to push the industry forward. So.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've got the resources. It sounds almost sounds a little boring if I had to say. It's like you've got these resources, you've got the skills, you've got the team. You're working everything's in place. I don't want to make it sound boring, but it does feel like you've got, it's really, you guys are just following up. You created a playbook, you're following it, and you're just pushing forward. And fortunately, aside from the boom and bust of COVID, cycling is a growing business, not growing like, maybe they thought it was going to grow in 22 and 23, but it is going to continue to grow. So, I mean, hats off to you guys and hats off to the work you guys are doing. It's really fun to have been able to kind of speak and hear more about it.
Thank you. And to the point about being boring, I mean, in the way you put it, but I think everybody that works and has a dream or a passion, seeing something you think about, envision, and then actually seeing it come to life is really rewarding.
No,
It's
of
one of the
course,
things that
but I
really
think
drives me every day. And so while, on the day to day, it sounds like you're just, plugging away
you have
at,
to.
at,
You
at
don't really have a choice.
an enormous task, but when that task gets done and you see that when you finally push that rock uphill and it gets to the top and starts rolling down the other side, it's quite gratifying as for the whole entire team because everybody knows how hard they work to get that.
Well, and I think that at the end of the day, once you've been around enough, to do this type of work and to build something big is a little bit mundane. You just have to really day by day get in, put in the work. That's the only way that things are going to happen in my experience.
Mm.
So thank you again, Chris. It was great having the time and speaking with you. And I guess if people want to reach you, what is a good place they can do that?
Well, one, thank you again for this time and
Yeah.
opportunity to speak to your listeners. And yeah, if people want to reach out and contact me, the best way is to reach me through LinkedIn.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chris. It was great talking with you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.